Okay, well, welcome to another question for Andrew about church planning. Andrew, thanks very much for your time. Today we're looking at the question, how do you deal with the difficult task of fundraising? Who do you go to? How hard do you press? And what are the options when you start your church? I mean, what are you prepared to say to people? What do you
Yeah,
think? How did you handle saying to people, "Hi, I'm here. I'd like your money"? How does that
yeah,
work?
that's right. Look, there's a great question. There's a good question. This is the bread and butter in after preaching the word prayerfully in fellowship together. This is such a crucial issue, and I guess what I mean by that is a couple of things. Our aim our aim is to be self-sufficient churches that become giving churches that offer more than just a home group that perhaps have the resource to put on a youth ministry to grow up. If that's our aim, and I know there's other ways to do church planting, um, but if our aim is to be that kind of church, then there'll always be a significant financial component involved in the running of it to free up some members of the church to devote themselves to the work. Now, how do you deal with that? I don't know. There's a theme in some of the things I think I kept saying. It starts with you. How you deal with the task of fundraising, the first thing you've got to work on is what's going on for you here, because we've got to get our heads right about money. It is just another God-given resource, like a person's time. In fact, money is just liquid time. That's what it is. And so it's another resource that's bound by the gospel, that expresses a person's spiritual life. And it's interesting, I meet people who have no problem hitting up congregation members about how they're using their time, but they balk when it comes to hitting them up about their money. And I think it's because we still have to capture this sense of what money is. It's just liquid time. It's another resource God's given us. And I suspect there's a few reasons why we balk, which we do need to deal with in our own hearts. One of the reasons we balk is that there have been so many abuses in church history over money. So we tend to be a bit gun-shy about the way we speak about it. And I think one of the best things we can do as leaders is be sensitive to that abuse, own it has happened, and be careful that we don't abuse in the way we talk about money. And so, if that's something that's, as I come to my congregation or the few core I've got or the friends around me, I'm thinking I don't want to look like that, televangelist who, you've got to deal with that. You've got to, I don't have to look like them. Just because I ask for money doesn't make me like that. I think there's another reason why we can struggle, which we have to deal with. Money, of course, is a sacred cow for people. What we do with our money shows our hearts probably more than anything else. And so when I talk to someone about the way they're using their money and whether they're going to give to this ministry or not, I'm touching very deep things in their lives. People resist because they're sensing that it's touching them deeply. And out of their guilt, they make me feel guilty.
Yeah.
They want me to kind of back off because it's touching them. And when you're aware that some of those reactions your conversations will arouse, because the problem's not you, it's what's in the heart of the person you're speaking to, it becomes at that point a test of your grasp of what matters most. Fear God, fear men. Life and death gospel matters so much. Am I prepared to put up with the angst it might create those that I talk to? Yeah. So the sacred cow issue we need to deal with. I think there's a third one. It's sometimes you can feel selfish when you ask. So, I'm asking people to give money, and typically in a church plan, I'm asking them to give money to me. It feels like. And, it makes me a little hesitant to come and ask them to give. We got to deal with
They'll
that
ever
one.
see you on the street having a cup of coffee later in the day. That's the
Yeah,
coffee
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
paid for, yeah.
That's your money that's come to me. That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And interestingly, I've noticed over the years, congregation members do this to you as well. They actually, churches slide into this thing of giving to church is giving to ourselves, giving to missionaries is giving outside of ourselves, it's giving away from ourselves. And that's a subtle form of the same thinking, I think, where we've got to help each other realise that, when I'm asking people to give to me to fund my work, I'm asking them to give to the work of the gospel.
Mm.
And my work in Erina, Terrigal, Central Coast, is as much a mission outpost as Ethiopia.
Mm.
So I'm not asking people to give to me selfishly in this ministry, whilst out there is giving away. This is actually selfless giving to give to me. And so there's a sneaking suspicion that we feel we're selfish when we're asking. We've got to get over that. We're asking people to invest in the gospel cause, to give to save lives. The fourth one is a funny one. I think it's a sneaking insecurity about spiritual work versus physical work. That is to say, I haven't seen anyone embarrassed about asking money for the flood appeal in Queensland.
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
everyone gets up and, because not only isn't it here in my suburb, it's over there, and it's a clear and evident need, and everyone's aware of it, and so I have no problem. Well, we ought to be less concerned about standing up and asking money or going and fronting people and asking money for spiritual work that has far greater consequences, is far more serious, is far less about me. And I guess in all of this, what I'm saying is we see asking for money as a difficult task because all of these reasons press back against us. And people will push back against us. And there'll be a subtle message, don't ask. And we don't want you to ask, and so one of the techniques we'll do is to make you feel like the televangelist.
Yeah.
Or that prosperity gospel guy, So if you don't get your head right about all of these things, we'll be shaping that culture instead of leading it.
Yeah.
And transforming it and teaching people to rethink the way there. The problem's there. It's not here with me asking. So practicalities, what do you do? Who do you go to? Once you get all that right in your head, you just go to anyone.
Hey, I'm going to hold you just before you get on to that point and talk about practicalities. And I'm sure some people are waiting to hear that. You say it's got a lot to do with working on yourself. How do you practically model it to yourself? Like are ministers exempt from looking to giving to other places? When you're putting the church budget together, is it an end point in itself, everything that's being done in Erina, or are you looking and going, yeah, we've got to have an outward focus as well? I mean, if it's this not just how my attitude towards this church, but my attitude towards giving in general.
Yeah. It's. I think personally, yes, you do need to work on, why do I think it matters that I give to the work in Tanzania or the work in Strasbourg where we support missionaries, or why do I give money to a child, compassion child that why do I give money to those things, and what proportion do I do? Where should the bulk of my money go? On what's the basis and principles I operate to do all of that? Yeah, I've got to think that through for myself.
So you're workshopping that, and you think that helps workshop it for everybody else?
Oh yeah, totally. Because then I can come to people with a clearly articulated principle, set of foundations on how I've thought it through, which doesn't therefore become the mandated way you must, but it indicates a set of principles I'm operating from, which should influence the way I do talk to others. So for mine, I think as a member of a ministry, so not thinking as the pastor in the ministry, but a member of a church, I'm obliged to support the work that I benefit from, and that is seeking to reach my immediate area, which God has put me in and given me a responsibility for. So I think that ought to take the bulk of my giving, and then I move out from that in a series of concentric circles in the way I think.
Okay, let me go for the golden question now. I know I've held people off. Here it is. Tell us, who do you ask? How do you ask them? What are the practicalities?
Good. Who do you ask? Look, anyone, everyone. Part of my.
Should I be looking for my wallet?
I'm coming for you. Part of my pastoral work is to help people's spiritual growth. Everyone I'm pastoring, and because money is such a deep aspect of who I am in my Christian life, that's part of my calling to help people think through and grow and mature it. So anyone and everyone. As we started the church here, I wrote letters to any church that I'd had any involvement in. I wrote letters to friends that I knew, past and so on. I wrote letters to. I made some calls to various of those. I did take note of a few more wealthy people, and I think one of the great things for Geneva actually is we've got a few men now who have linked in wonderfully, recognising their responsibility as those that God has given much to financially, and so they've taken on patronage with the work. And as planters, you do want to find those kind of men, and for their sake, invite them to give and sponsor the gospel task.
This might be a good opportunity just to plug, for those people who haven't seen it yet, Simon Pillar's talk from National Institute, in Canberra. It's on the website, it's in the audio section. Go check it out on Gospel Patrons. Brilliant on that topic.
Yeah. So Simon, more than most I've spoken to, he has captured the essence of how he can use what God has given him, and he's seen it down through history and the way God's worked. It's quite wonderful. Yeah. So I guess I want to say, you just go for it. You talk about the way we spend our time, the way you're using your money, the way you're relating in public and community life, what's your private disciplines. All of that's part of the picture. And in all of this, you keep putting to people the vision. So it's not just give money, it's own the vision of what God is doing and seeking to do. And so everything that you have that might empower that vision, we want to call forth to give to it. Time, prayers, money, and so on.
Hey, can I ask a tricky question about the vision? So when do you start? It's one thing talking to people who might be supporters of the vision to go into a particular area and to plant. What about the core group that you might be gathering from that area? Do you wait until they're all mature and committed and then you ask them about money? Do you start asking for money from week one? Where does that fit in the sort of church plant scale?
Yeah. One of the big principles I guess I'm concerned about in planting is that we don't create a welfare mentality amongst the people we plant with. So our church plant here at Erina, we had a couple of churches give some funds, tens of thousands. I think it was about $30,000. Within about 6 months, I worked hard to pay them back. So I began to talk to our launch team, our core group, about the need for us to be givers and not welfare people, and recognise that God had given us some resource, which we're responsible for as well, and the churches that had been sponsoring us did it at great cost themselves. We need now to step up. And so within 6 months, we'd given back a sizable amount of that money to one of the main churches. And for mine, that was an important step to build into our life that we are accountable and responsible for our own work here. And more than that, we want to step up and be givers beyond our work here. So very early, we were talking about financial responsibilities and the need to be giving and generous and sacrificial, because I was gospeling people. And just the nature of gospeling is to see the gospel transform every area of your life. One of those is finances.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't make much more sense to cut that one out than it is to not talk about driving or politics or something like that. Yeah. I think the challenge is to some of the other church plants around the place to work out the wisdom of what expectations you can place on a congregation that's brand new in a lower socioeconomic area for being self-sufficient. So the time, the time frame might take longer, but the principle's got to be there. We want, wherever you are, we want this group to be a giving group and not just a welfare group. Yeah. And I remember thinking years ago a lot about the maths of it. Just simply, if people tithed, it only needed 10 families for me to have a living. Because
pretty easy maths. And so, you know, if whatever socioeconomic setting they were in, whatever standard of living they had, if 10 families tithed, I'd have the same standard of living. I was happy for that. And so I did keep talking along those lines with everyone and encouraging and stirring each other up to think in those terms, yeah.
And once you got 11 families, everybody was comfortable.
Exactly right. Exactly right. We can start thinking about the next staff member. Yeah.
Okay. Mate, thank you very much for your time. If you've been listening and you've been enjoying what you're hearing, and you've got a question for Andrew about church planning, put it in. We've yet to stump him. I'm saving some of the more difficult ones for a couple of weeks. But actually, if you've got a chance, the address is coming up on the screen in a moment or so. Fire off a question, and we'll get Andrew to have a go to it for you. See you later.
Good on you. Thank you.